What's up, guys? It's Hunter Sitchy from CheckShotPoker.com, and today we're going to be reviewing my performance at the final table of the 1K Online WSOP bracelet event that I took second in this summer. So before we get started, there are a few things that you need to know. First of all, the live portion of this final table was played out in the Thunderdome and live streamed on WSOP.com. This final table took place on July 4th, 2015, and I've already done a training video of all of the hands leading up to this final table segment. So go check that out before you continue with this video if you haven't already seen it. Also, if you'd like the actual live stream footage, it's available on WSOP.com/videos. I'm not allowed to use that footage for this hand history review since WSOP.com is only allowed to host that footage on their site. ESPN actually owns the rights to the videos. So a couple other things that you need to know. Ryan Franklin was eliminated early, and he isn't included in any of these hand histories. He actually went out when he 5-bet Ace-King all-in pre-flop versus Spinella's aces in a very standard spot. Spinella doubled through him, and after that he had 50% of the chips in play, and ICM became a huge factor at this final table due to the really large pay jumps involved. And you're going to see a lot of that in the upcoming hand histories. One last thing, I was involved in 26 of the 84 hands that were played at this final table, and I chose to only include the 26 hands that I was involved in because the other ones would be way too time consuming for a half-hour video. So with that being said, let's just jump into this hand history review, and hopefully you can learn some things today. So I folded the first 14 hands at this final table because I was completely card dead. On hand number 15, I got involved. The blinds were 25K, 50K with a 5K ante. Rose and Varnell folded, and I opened to 100K from a 795K stack on the button with King Jack suited. David Tuthill went into the tank in the small blind with pocket deuces and 9 big blinds, and I think he ended up folding because he realized that it was unlikely for him to have any fold equity versus my open. And then Spinella, who was the chip leader at the time, quickly moved all in for 4.74 million, having me covered by a ton, and he also had the other King Jack. At that point, calling off my stack would be ICM suicide in that spot, so I really just had to fold, and you're going to notice some strange situations like that where I had to play tighter than I normally would because Spinella was a landslide chip leader and he was 2 to my left. After David Tuthill was eliminated, he was directly to my left, so I had to play significantly tighter than I normally would at this final table due to ICM considerations. A couple hands later, hand number 19, the blinds are the same. Spinella folds, Rose folds, Varnell opens to 115K from the button with Jack 10 offsuit. And at this point, it seemed like he was opening 50% of hands pre-flop and probably 80% of hands on the button. So moving all in with Ace 8 offsuit for 620K, roughly 13 big blinds, was a very, very easy decision. Tuthill folded and Varnell folded, and I took down a nice pot with the resteal. Then immediately after that, hand number 20, Rose folds, Varnell folds, and I move all in on the button for 805K, roughly 16 big blinds with Ace 5 offsuit. Tuthill folds and Spinella folds, and we move on to the next hand. Hand number 26, the blinds are the same. Varnell folded from the cutoff. I raised to 100K from the button with Jack 7 suited. And a couple of people didn't understand why I opened here. I guess it's important to realize that Jack 7 suited is a standard open if you're min raising. It's standard if you're opening to 2.5 big blinds as long as there are antes. And I think it's probably a fold around 3 big blinds. So it's important to understand the GTO differences between different opening sizes. Spinella ended up folding from the small blind, and Rose called out of the big blind with 10-5 suited. At that point, the pot was 245K, and the flop came Queen 8-4 with 1 spade. Rose checked, and I have a backdoor flush draw with plenty of cards on the turn that give me a gut shot or a pair. So I chose to follow through with that hand. I think that's one of the best hands that I can be c-betting with on this board. And luckily Rose check folded and I took down a pot of 345k. Hand number 27, blinds are the same. I opened to 100k from the cutoff with sixes. Spinella folded, Rose folded, and then Varnell called out of the big blind with ace-4 offsuit. Totally standard so far. The pot is 245k. And the flop came king 8-7. Varnell checked, and I feel that sixes have as much or more showdown value than ace high on this board. I chose to check back to balance my range here, and keep in mind that I'm occasionally going to check back with a king here as well to protect pocket sixes on the turn. Turn is the six of clubs, so I turn a set. Varnell checks. I bet my standard 100k delayed continuation bet, and Varnell has nothing. He decides to just check fold, and again I take down another 345k pot. On to the next hand. Hand number 28, blinds are the same. Spinella folds. Rose opens the button to 120k with ace-10 off. Varnell folded, and I looked down at pocket eights in the big blind with 23 big blinds. And this is a unique situation. So had it been a nine-handed table and somebody opened under the gun with a tight range, I probably would have just called. Had it been Spinella opening the button, I think I would have 3-bet intending to call a 4-bet. But since it was Rose, who is an older player, and I don't expect him to be 4-betting light that often, 3-betting doesn't really create a good situation for me. He's either going to flat, and I'm going to have to play out of position with a very static hand in a bloated pot, or he's going to 4-bet with a range that's probably too tight for me to call it off, and I don't want to create either of those situations. So I felt that moving all in for 23 bigs was probably the best play because it allowed me to put a tremendous amount of pressure on two overcards like ace-10 offsuit, especially because of ICM considerations. So that's what I chose to do. I'm interested in what you think about my decision here, and luckily I ended up taking down the pot. Hand number 29, blinds are the same. Rose folded from the cutoff. Varnell opened the button to 110k with 8-7 suited. And I'm in the small blind. I've spoken extensively on why I never flat out of the small blind, so go check out those other 3-betting videos that I've done. I chose to 3-bet to 2.5x from a 990k starting stack with King Jack off. Spinella folded out of the big and Varnell called from the button. The pot was 570k, and the flop came ace 5 deuce. With two spades. Now, if I was in position, I would probably check back with King Jack since it's the second best no pair hand that you can be dealt. But since I'm out of position and I don't want to expose my equity to a stab from Varnell, I chose to follow through. And the great part about this is that I have blockers to Ace Jack and Ace King if for some reason he chose to flat with that. And there are also turn cards that allow me to pick up a gut shot and follow through on multiple streets. I ended up down betting to 175k, and Varnell made a great play with spade draw and ended up shipping it for roughly 1.5 million, and I was forced to fold at that point. Hand number 32, Spinella opens to 125k from the cutoff with 9-8 offsuit. At this point, he was opening at least 50% of hands because of his massive chip lead and the ICM considerations involved. Rose folded, Varnell folded, and I just moved all in out of the big blind with ace-7 offsuit for 960k. That's way, way ahead of his opening range, and I don't see myself making any other play with that hand. I ended up taking it down. Hand number 33, the blinds are 30k, 60k with a 5k ante. Rose folded from the cutoff, Varnell folded from the button, and I looked down at 7-6 suited from the small blind and chose to complete. So I've done a couple videos on why I limp with my entire continuous range from the small blind in tournaments with antes. So go check that out if you need further explanation here. Spinella checked it back with 9-6 offsuit. The pot was 160k, and the flop came queen 8-4 with two clubs. Some people would lead on this flop. I think that's bad. If you're leading with all of your gut shots on this board, you're going to be over bluffing by quite a bit. I would have led had I flopped a backdoor flush out to go with my gut shot, but since I just had a naked gut shot on this board, I was forced to check fold. Hand number 34, Varnell folded, and I opened the button with Queen Jack offsuit and stole the blinds. Hand number 39, I raised to 120k from the cutoff with King Queen offsuit. Spinella folded, Rose shoved from the big blind with Queen Jack offsuit, and of course I was priced in. I call. Luckily, I flop a king and eliminate Rose in fifth place. Scratch that. Rose actually went out in fourth place. I forgot that David Tudhill went out in fifth place when he shipped a combo draw into Spinella's top pair top kicker. So we're actually down to three, and at this point, Spinella had 6.87 million versus my second place chip stack with only 1.52 million and Varnell's stack of 860k. So at this point, it was basically a competition for second place with a 43k pay jump. So massive, massive ICM considerations involved, especially since Varnell and I only had roughly 15 to 20 big blinds each. So hand number 41, blinds are still 30k, 60k with a 5k ante. Varnell folded the button, and I limped the small blind with 5 deuce of hearts. That's just barely in my continuance range. Spinella raised to 200k, and I chose to just give it up. Hand number 42, I raised the button to 120k with Jack 8 suited. Spinella folded, and Varnell called out of the big blind with 7-6 off, and the pot was 300k. The flop came 7-6-3 with 2 clubs. I chose to follow through on this since the 8 gives me options, and having 2 overcards helps a little bit. Varnell ended up check raising to 360k, and of course I have absolutely nothing. I fold, and it turns out he flopped 2 pair on this hand. Hand number 45, I move all in for just over $1 million from the button with pocket sixes and take down the blinds. So hand number 48, blinds are still 30k, 60k, and I move all in from the button with ace deuce suited for just about $1 million, and Spinella and Varnell fold. I take down the pot. Hand number 55 is a big one. Varnell ends up moving all in from the small blind with Queen 8 suited for 730k, and I snap call with Ace 10 offsuit out of the big blind. But this was a very big situation because Varnell had me covered by about 1.5 big blinds, and there was a 43k pay jump on the line, so I really needed to win this hand, and luckily I spike a 10 on the river and take it down. Then Varnell miraculously comes back. He doubles up twice. Then he gets queens versus Spinella's jacks, doubles up again, and now he's back up to the same stack as this hand, or hand number 55. So hand number 64, Varnell moves all in from the small blind again for 850k with Queen 8 offsuit this time, and this is a very, very close call here because of ICM considerations. If it had been earlier in the tournament with no ICM, King 9 is a snap. But with such a huge pay jump on the line, fold equity is so important in these situations. You really want to be shoving a lot more than you want to be calling. But I just knew that Varnell was shipping it so wide. He was aware of the ICM considerations. I felt like King 9 was the best hand a lot of the time, and I ended up having to call 11 of my 14 big blinds. So this is roughly 60k worth of equity, and the guys commenting up in the booth basically said the same thing. It's a 43k pay jump plus a small shot at winning the whole thing. Luckily, my hand holds up, and I eliminate Varnell in second place. I thought he played great, actually. He played really, really well at this final table, and he just ran into a couple hands when Spinella actually had it. So at this point, I have exactly 2 million as the blinds go up to 40k, 80k. That leaves me with 25 big blinds. Hand number 65. This is the first hand of heads up play. I raised to 200k from the small blind with aces, and Spinella folds. Hand number 69, I open to 200k from the small blind with ace 8 suited, and Spinella folds. And then you see that I don't play a hand until hand number 74. I was completely card dead, and all I was getting was offsuit, unconnected hands, and those are just too weak to limp the small blind against Spinella. He's going to just punish me with isolation raises. They're too weak to raise versus him because I think he's going to play too well out of position, and he's probably going to be three betting me a lot since he has such a massive chip lead. And at the same time, I didn't want to defend out of position against him with uncoordinated hands because he's just so good in position. So I was forced to just fold those hands, stay within GTO ranges, and just kind of take a beating from the blinds as he grinded me down here. Hand number 74, I opened a 200K from the small blind with Jack 8 suited and Spinella folds. Hand number 75 is probably the most interesting hand of the tournament. Spinella opens to 175K from the small blind with Ace Jack offsuit, and I call out of the big blind with 6-4 suited. Had we have been deeper, I probably would have light 3-bet with this, but since we were so shallow, I chose to just take my direct odds. On the flop, the pot was 370K, and the board came King of Diamonds, Queen of Diamonds, Deuce of Hearts. I checked, Spinella bets 100K, and I chose to just check call. I think check raising is bad on this board since most turn cards are going to remain fairly static unless it's a diamond. And I also don't have many value combos in my range. Sure, I might have King Queen or King Deuce or Queen Deuce, but possibly a set of deuces. But it's going to be really hard for me to rep top set or middle set or a hand like Ace King. There's just not much value in my range on this board, so I chose to just check call. The turn is the King of Clubs. It's complete blank, and it goes check, check. And the river was the 8 of Hearts, and I bet 175K into 570K. Some of the people watching the live stream disagreed with my bet sizing on this river. But this is a spot where I'm going to be value betting really, really thin, trying to get called by ace high, and I think that they failed to consider that. So I would be betting any queen and probably any pair on this river, hoping to get called by ace high. And in order for me to balance a wide value betting range like that, I have to bet 175K when I'm bluffing. And I also knew that Spinella was good enough that he would probably see that, and I felt like he might lay down a hand as strong as like ace 10 here. He ended up seeing through that and realizing that ace jack was toward the top of his range in this spot, and I think he just decided to get sticky there, getting 4-1 and call. Another thing to note is that if I bet bigger, I leave myself with less than 15 big blinds, so I don't have any reshipping opportunities pre-flop. It would either just be shove or fold, or I would be in situations where Spinella was shoving and I'd have to call with like a fairly narrow range, and I didn't want to create that situation on future hands. I wanted to have about 18 big blinds so that I did have the option to reship if I got something decent. So there was a lot of thought that went into my river bet there. I didn't just click a button that said 175K. Hand number 77, blinds are still 40K, 80K with the 10K ante. Spinella calls out of the small blind with ace 4, and I decided to just check with queen 5 suited and hopefully realize my equity on the flop. The flop comes jack 6-4 with the jack of spades. So again, the guys up in the booth thought it was bad for me to stab here, but they were just completely missing all the barreling opportunities that I have with queen 5 suited. Like if any ace, any king, any queen comes off, I can follow through. If I hit a 5, I have a gut shot. If a 7 or a 3 comes off, I have an open ender. If a deuce or an 8 comes off, I have a gut shot. Just like so many opportunities on turn cards that I felt like I had to lead here. Even though Spinella is a really sticky player, he called, and then the turn is just a complete blank. It's the 9 of hearts. I can't do anything. So I check, Spinella checks, and I give up because I can't rep anything when the 7 of spades comes off on the river and Spinella checks and wins. But it looks like I'm just stabbing and giving up. But when, again, there was a lot of thought going into my decision on this flop. Hand number 78, I raised to 200K with 10-3 suited. I think I should probably be opening with any 2 suited cards at this stack depth. Spinella calls with queen 10 offsuit, and the board comes jack 8-6 with 2 diamonds and 1 spade. So I've talked about this in all my videos. I have to follow through with all my backdoor spade draws on this flop, otherwise I'm going to be way off balance. Spinella checks. I bet with my backdoor spade draw and my backdoor straight draw, and Spinella moves all in for $1 million. I have to give him credit for uh, just check raising with a gut shot and an overcard here. That's pretty strong. I definitely give him credit on that one. And hand number 79, I move all in for 625K from the small blind, and Spinella folds. I'm not sure what I had. I think I had ace X something. And then last hand, hand number 84, I had to fold 5 hands in a row, being completely card dead. Uh, Spinella moves all in for 715K effective from the small blind. And I call with Queen 4 suited. Some people thought that this was too light for me to call here, but I called for this reason. In other heads-up matches that I've played against people, I've noticed that at the uh, 8 to 15 big blind mark, a lot of them will min raise with the top 25% of their range, hoping to get more action, and then they realize that they need to be shoving wide. So a lot of times they'll just move all in with like the bottom region of their range, hopefully hoping to just maximize their fold equity. And Spinella was flipping back and forth between min raising and moving all in, so I felt like uh, when he shoved queen high was a lot more likely to be good in this situation than it would be if he min raised, and that's why I decided to call it off with 8 or 9 big blinds right here, and he outflops me and wins. Congratulations to him. He played great the whole tournament, and I have nothing bad to say about the guy. He's a really good guy, and I was also really glad to take a short stack to the final table and level up well, and end up taking second place for my biggest cash to date. 116K was a nice payday, and I was really happy with it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this hand history review. Hopefully you picked some things up. Again, I'm Hunter Sitchy from CheckShotPoker.com. Make sure you guys run good, have fun, and constantly look for ways to improve.